Right, time for talking points there. There are the 7, as you can see. 2 minutes on the clock. We're going to start with the O'Brien juveniles. We started with City of Troy. Lee, they once again going into the season. Obviously, this was the back referencing the ratings for the juveniles, but he's going into the 3-year-old campaign as you might expect. Yeah, again, there was no surprise that Equinox was the world champion, nor that City of Troy was the highest rated 2-year-old of 2023. A mark of 125 doesn't put him at the very highest echelons of juveniles over recent seasons. Horses like Frankel, Dream Ahead and a couple more recently have had higher marks than that, but it's a very, very high mark. He was clearly the 2-year-old champion of the year. Aidan O'Brien also had the top filly in Opera Singer. The long-term future, or the 2024 future for City of Troy is going to be really interesting. Nick interviewed Aidan on his pod during the week, in which Aidan again repeated an ambition for City of Troy to potentially have a dual surface campaign. Yes. Yes, Guineas and Derby. We want. Absolutely, Guineas and Derby, and then perhaps trips to America. Not necessarily a surprise. He is by Justify, so he's got a tremendous dirt influence in his pedigree as well. But connections have also ruminated, particularly Michael Tabor, on how marvellous it would be if he could be a Triple Crown candidate and go on to the St Leger. So the world is City of Troy's oyster at the moment, Tom. And yeah, he's massively exciting, isn't he, going into Wouldn't that be for I think the last horse they ran in the Classic might have been Glen Eagles. I might be wrong there, but it wasn't an obvious one. But we've got one now. We've got the obvious, but even August Road. I was going to say they might have two. But August Road as well. You know, that's what I find really lights up the international circuit, is when you have a star turf performer going and trying to mix it with the best on the dirt. So let's hope that happens. Yeah, it could do. And if all goes well and he goes Guineas and Derby and they happen as they would like, then they could go Jumbo International, they could go Travers onto the Classic. Yeah, there you go. Right, my BHA Uturn. So this is on, obviously, it was put out that there was a possibility the BHA were going to introduce a rule that a trainer couldn't have more than a certain amount of horses running in handicaps, or in any races, I think. That has been confirmed earlier on this week, that any plans have been shelved. What was your take on it, Harry, when it was announced? And do you feel that the right sort of position has been come to now, that it's certainly been shelved for now anyway? Yeah,
I mean, I think obviously they're looking at the competitiveness of races and racing, and I mean, it was very. I don't think the way they went about it in terms of trying to almost penalise. I felt it was penalising the success of trainers. I mean, I'd love to be in a position to have those number of runners in those sort of top races, but I don't think
Would it annoy you, or does it? I guess if you had a live Grand National candidate, say, and because a yard was dominating the entries for that race, would you feel frustration that you might not get to run because of that reason, or do you feel that that's fair and just?
Well, no, but I think there's other ways of doing it, and I think when you're in races, I think that we should be advocating that rather than limiting numbers of horses per trainer. I think if you're a Welsh national winner or such a BHA Chase winner, things like that, I think that would be a better way of guaranteeing that horses get into the race like a Grand National. Because I mean, obviously, I'm sure the thinking was behind it, with obviously the Grand National field, the numbers being reduced this year, that they didn't want half the field possibly in the hands of only a couple of trainers. So I think there's ways of making these races more competitive without almost that sort of restriction on the trainers that have been successful and have the number of horses that they do, but and therefore going about and introducing ways where horses are guaranteed runs in these races, I think would be a better approach.
Chester?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it. The winning you're in system would make races more competitive. The Grand National, I think this directly related to the Grand National, not really any other race. And getting into the National is going to get increasingly hard now. You're going to need 147, 148 to even be in the race. But actually, if you had some winning and you're in races, it would make the whole thing more competitive.
Penalties, Tom.
penalties.
Penalties.
So the minute the Grand National is treated differently to other major handicaps, once the weights come out, there are no penalties. I don't think it makes any sense. If you want to create more interest into the Grand National, you'd have a system whereby a horse goes into, say, the Ultima or the Premier Chase at Kelso or the Grimthorpe, and if he wins, he gets a £5 penalty that gets him into the Grand National. You want to have a situation, I think, where the Grand National 34 runners are the best 34 runners on the day in mid-April, not in mid-February.
World Racehorse Awards. Roger Varon suggested afterwards that as a jurisdiction, perhaps we're just falling behind a little bit. What was your take overall, Lee, on the World Racehorse Awards? As you say, there wasn't a surprise at the top. No,
I mean, I think in many ways it was the greatest day yet for Japanese racing. We've heard repeatedly how well Japan is doing, and it really is. They had Equinox, the second time Japan's had the world champion racehorse, but it's the highest rated horse in Japanese history. The Japan Cup was the world's highest rated race for the first time. 4 of the top 8 races staged anywhere in the world in 2023 were staged in Japan. 3 of them were won by Equinox. So it was a huge day for Japan. Roger Varon, speaking to my colleague Maddie Plale afterwards, highlighted the difference between Japan and Britain, how the two jurisdictions are doing at the moment. We all know there are enormous problems over here in terms of prize money and in terms of a talent drain. But there are other ways in which Japan is doing better than us. It's got a tremendously strong governing body, and it's not the BHA's fault that it's not equipped in the same way that the JRA is. The JRA has almost limitless power. But Japan's philosophy in horse racing is better than ours when it comes to flat racing, not least in the sense that the Japan breeding industry embraces stamina over speed. There's none of this ridiculous idea of a 2-year-old going straight to stud or a mid-ranking 3-year-old going off to stud. You have to be a very good horse to get to stud in Japan, and also they want horses to be bred for stamina, which sadly is why Hookham and Westover have left our part of the world and are now standing at stud in Japan.
Yeah, Adayar too. The depth or the future of stamina, which tend to be the world's best racehorses, right? You don't tend to have a sprinter at the top of it. Yeah. It's only heading one way.
And it's concentrated excellence too. They have such a tight Group 1 pattern programme, which means that every Group 1 matters. And even in races in which Equinox was taking part, there were big double-figure fields. They want to run in those races, and they have to run in those races.
The rescheduling module, I feel like every January this comes to light. You know, we do lose throughout the winter in the UK, Harry, a number of races because of the weather. Clerks of the courses and teams everywhere will do their utmost as much as they can, but sometimes it's not always possible. Ascot, you know, we're pretty open about the reasons why a Saturday can't just be shifted to a Sunday. Ultimately, you know, it costs too much money. Is it frustrating, or it's not financially viable? Is it frustrating on your part that race days can't simply be rearranged, or do you have sympathy with the organisers?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously it's frustrating when you've set your stall out for certain races, and I mean, obviously that last weekend we lost the Winter Millions completely last year, and Ascot, that same is just. I mean, you can. So 2 years on the trot, we've lost the same weekend practically, and there's good prize money on offer. And obviously, I mean, that was where we'd hoped to go with Love Envoy last week. So and that was a valuable race. But yeah, no, I mean, you understand the racecourses, and as you said, Ascot pointed out financially viable. So, I mean. It's great that they can rearrange some of the better races. We saw the Clarence House was saved yesterday. And Doncaster have had some of the other races yesterday and today. So it's great that we can save some of the race. But yeah, it is undoubtedly frustrating, but you can understand where the racecourses are going. We can't expect them to just put meetings on and run them at a loss when they're putting up the prize money that's on offer.
Is there a solution, Lee, do you think, to losing whole cards?
Not necessarily, no, Tom, no, because the point Ascot made was that if we did stage this card 24 hours later, it would not be commercially viable for us. For some reason, some tracks work on Sundays, some tracks don't work on Sundays in terms of they can't pull in crowds. So whilst we'd all love to see a good Saturday card just those 24 hours later, particularly when you know it's going to be 10 degrees warmer or something and the meeting will be saved, if it's not commercially viable for the racecourse to stage that meeting, then regrettably it won't be staged. And I think we have a good structure now of identifying races that do need to be saved and finding them new homes. So much so that on this occasion there was competition between Doncaster and Cheltenham, between the Arc and the Jockey Club, to stage the Clarence House Chase.
I mean, obviously we say, oh, January every year. The only thing I think is we could be a tiny bit more proactive. No, rather than react, I think we're always reactive in terms of restaging meetings. And actually, if we know there are certain meetings that are too valuable to be lost, we should be almost proactive and sort of thinking, if we lose this meeting, already have a slot for it in the programme. If we lose the initial meeting in January, it's the same sort of every year. It's not. We sort of lose roughly the same meetings every year. So
I wonder if Ireland, you see in Ireland, whole days seem to be rearranged, but ultimately there are fewer days racing there. It comes back to the. I'm not going to talk about too much racing again in the UK, but there we are. I wonder if it comes back to that. It's not possible to say, well, 7 days later we'll run it, because all of a sudden then there's other races to be thinking about. The Caldwell dispersal. So this is the Browns obviously announcing Caldwell construction that with immediate effect their horses will go to public auction the day after the Dublin Racing Festival ends. I think that's Monday the 5th now, I think it is, of February. Chester, their reasons specifically being because of the recent loss of a number of horses, both high profile and not necessarily, has been too hard hitting on their family. It's a young family, a family with young children, and it's essentially been too painful for them. I guess their honesty is pretty candid. But for the sport, I've had it quite striking to hear. It's hugely sad for the sport.
I mean, there are plenty of owners that leave racing all the time, but actually it's very rarely sort of put forward as the loss of a certain number of horses, and the rest of the horses, high-profile ones for them in particular, has been the reason. And I can see, sometimes if it gets to the point where you're watching a race and all your thing is, I hope it comes back safe, and you can't enjoy it, and actually it becomes a stress. At that point, I'm not really sure you should be owning horses. And I know they've got a young family. There aren't that many owners that have young families. Owners tend to be typically are older, and it's very hard hitting. And I feel sorry that they have had a number of high profile and good horses that they've lost.
I mean, it might not necessarily be a final point for them, but I think particularly, Harry, what came across was there's young children. I guess the idea of explaining what is going on and it being hard-hitting to the family is just not for them now. And you have a young family, I guess you have to sympathise with that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's... I mean, people get into racehorse ownership to enjoy it. And as you say, it's obviously got to a stage where that they're not getting that, and clearly. So, but, I mean, as you said, I mean, it's disappointing for the sport as a whole to see owners that have invested heavily in the sport just like that make a decision that it's just not for them anymore. So it is, but you've got to sympathise and respect, obviously clearly respect how they feel, and they're obviously not getting the enjoyment what they hope to get out of it.
You can have 15 seconds on it, Lee, if you'd like.
Yeah, it's desperately sad. I mean, we're going to have Andy Edwards in the studio, Tom, soon, and he is, again, a great example of an owner who invests himself incredibly emotionally into his horses. He would completely empathise with the Browns situation. It's very sad, but I can understand why if they're finding it too traumatic, then it's not something that they should be involved with at the moment. It does mean, however, that there are 29 horses going for public auction and some really high-quality, high-class horses who'll be selling for a lot of money. Now, Gordon Elliott will want to keep the majority of those in his string, having done all the hard work with them up to now, but I'm sure there'll be others who'll be keen to do a bit of shopping on Monday week.
Yeah. Blue Rose Sen. Lee, I'm going to let you major on this. I wasn't aware of the fact that she's changed hands, so take it away, sir.
Well, this Tom, is an enormous head-scratcher. So Blue Rose Sen who was one of 2023 and 2022's best fillies, dual classic winner, won the Prix de l'Opera last season for trainer Christopher Head. It was announced during the week that her owners, who race under the name of Llegada Centurion, a Spanish gentleman, Leopoldo Fernandez Pujals, has decided to move Blue Rose Sen from the yard of Christopher Head to the Chanty yard of Maurizio Guarnieri, a gentleman who I admit I know nothing about. He was a new name to me. Seems strange in itself, moving a filly who's won 4 Group 1s for you from a well-known, high-profile trainer to someone who has less of a profile. Even stranger in the sense that the owners have kept 22 horses with Christopher Head, including Big Rock, who was so impressive in the Queen Elizabeth II stakes.
So I assume Big Rock was going. I assume they were all going.
No, so there hasn't ostensibly been a fallout in that you presumably don't keep 22 horses with a trainer who you've had fireworks with and don't disagree with, but they've now sent 10 horses to Guarnieri, who was a former Italian trainer now based in France. Lots of impeccably bred juveniles, but also Blue Rose Sen. And it is a bit puzzling as to why you would do that. And of course, owners have the prerogative to do anything they want. These owners have been particularly successful in a short space of time. But if you're Christopher Head, you're probably thinking, what on earth is going on here, and why have you done that to me?
It's been a temptation, Chester, to say if you've taken that one, you can take the rest of them.
Well, I think Harry will know that actually it just shows how difficult life as a trainer is, keeping people happy. Obviously, there must be some reason for this to happen, but I mean, it's very odd. But I mean, a trainer's life and keeping all the owners happy and keeping the horse in the yard is not at all easy.
What's the secret?
Winning.
Yeah.
But actually, Blue Rose Sen winning wasn't enough.
That wasn't enough.
No. It's not always winning even does the job.
Inspiral won an Eclipse Award, and the team at Cheveley Park, Lee, would have been absolutely delighted with that off the back of... I mean, there was such good racing at the Breeders' Cup. And it's obviously voted for by the Americans.
And Nick Luck.
And Nick Luck.
Yeah.
Is he the only He can't be the only one.
No, he can't be the only one, but
not.
he's, an esteemed member of
Quite,
the
he's
country.
big out there.
Absolutely, he is. He was there this weekend.
And actually, I know that he voted for, obviously a lot of people will have done for the obvious reason because of that performance.
Yes.
And we're going to get to see her next year.
Yeah, it's far from unprecedented for a European racehorse to win an Eclipse Award, but it's still a notable achievement. Hewitt last year got the top jumper. Inspiral this year, the top female turf performer. Nick would be able to tell you this better than I would do, but he said it's very rare for a European to come in and win an Eclipse Award off the back of a single performance in the States. But it's a reflection of how impressive she was there, and it's a reflection of how important the Eclipse Awards are to American racing, that Patricia Thompson and her son Richard both went out to Florida to receive the award. Great news again that she's staying in training. They certainly didn't need to keep her in training at the age of 5, but they are doing, and she'll be ambitiously campaigned again. And of course, we'll have that debate getting going probably in the spring.
Yeah.
You know where I'm going now, don't you?
Will there'll be two things. When will we see her?
Yeah.
Because
that's not the main one, though.
No, it's not.
No.
But because she tends to, it might be Royal Ascot. It can be. Whether or not she'll go for a Lockage in May, I don't know. Because as Patricia Thompson says, it's when she's ready, she'll tell us.
Absolutely, yes.
But what's going to be her best distance?
That's not what I was thinking.
Oh, what were you thinking?
What I was thinking was, who will ride her in the Queen Anne
that
Stakes?
one.
There's a certain jockey
go on.
who was at the Eclipse Awards, who has now finished in Britain.
Has he?
Apparently. Yeah. Apparently, but who would be an obvious contender to ride Inspiral in the Queen Anne Stakes.
Imagine that.
Imagine that.
There would be scenes. Good point. You should be a journalist.
No,
very good. You would get all the.
There's no future in it. No.
All the big headlines.
No.
There we are. That's it for this week's Talking Points.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.